This is Richer Than Music, documenting the stories of Canada's rich urban music culture. You're listening to Canada's Getting Colder, a joint perspective on Canadian hip-hop culture.
CHRY 105.5, you are locked into a special broadcast called Richer Than Music. This is Canada's Getting Colder, a joint perspective on Canadian hip-hop culture. We are going to discuss industry, and looking beyond the music, hip-hop as a culture has more than a few business elements with traction across the country. It has, however, been a challenge to qualify just how influential hip-hop culture has been throughout Canada's demographic. This segment, we will explore the potential of hip-hop as a vehicle to deliver a strong national message. In studio, we have from left to right on your video screens is David Click Cox, who is the owner of management and consulting company CLK Creative Works, also a partner in DJ servicing company On Blast Digital, and the list goes on with his credentials. Let it be known, Toronto, that this panel is definitely hip-hop. Also in the building, we have Jody Laraya, National Lifestyle Manager for Universal Music Canada. Thumbs down. We also have Jesse Jones, marketer and entrepreneur and founder of the 1081 Group, which now houses both JJ Urban and Uology 101. Currently, Jesse also oversees the brand management for Mark Echo Watches under Timex Group Canada. As well, in the building, we have Priya, who is a co-publisher, editor-in-chief, known to many as a passionate writer. Priya is also the editor-in-chief and co-founder of Urbanology magazine, one of Canada's leading hip-hop culture magazines. Now, we've been talking all evening about hip-hop culture, its influence on Canadian heritage, and just how it penetrates communities right across the country. And we can talk about Toronto till we're blue in the face, understanding that Toronto has a very cosmopolitan and deep, rich history with hip-hop. But right across the country, we're trying to find those common threads. When we talked about heritage, we were able to establish that hip-hop culture definitely resonates with people beyond ethnicity. It goes into the households beyond the Black urban culture, but also goes into households for anybody who can resonate with the fashion, with the music, with the lifestyle and things that are associated with that. That being all said, based on what we know of Canadian hip-hop right now as a culture, does it possess the penetration across the country necessary to deliver a viable marketing vehicle using hip-hop culture as a message?
Most definitely. Most definitely. I mean, I think it still has its challenges, though. When it comes to in Canada, I think it's the youth and everybody basically opens up their arms, eat, sleep, everything when it comes to hip hop. But I still find it's a challenge when you're trying to deal with corporate companies or deal with other companies that see that as a way to get to the youth, but at the same time, they want to turn their back to it sometimes. Maybe it's because they don't speak the language and don't get it, you know? Whereas, you know, when you have somebody like Jesse over here who actually works for a company and eats and sleeps it and dreams it, you know, it enables him to actually bring that lifestyle to his company and make it, you know, do some great synergies like he's done with the Stylus Awards and things like that. You know what I mean? Plug. But on the real, but that's what I feel like. I really, for somebody who's been trying to market and promote and work with, you know, properties that have to do with hip hop in this country, it is a major challenge.
So what I want to do then is I want to jump from there, because I think across the board we can say that unless there is somebody who disagrees that there is penetration of the hip-hop culture across the board, we'll jump right into, and we'll use Jesse as the guinea pig on this one. But has Canada's boardrooms ever attempted an urban influence campaign or message at any point in Canada's hip-hop history? And if so, how can we evaluate the results, whether they're positive or negative?
Yeah, I can speak on my own experiences. I mean,
Definitely,
because, you know, last year we did something really interesting with a guy by the name of Gavin Shepherd. Not sure if you guys, well, I'm sure everybody in this room knows who he is. A lot of people listening will know who he is. I think, to Click's point, what has to happen is there needs to be a level of understanding within these brands and these companies in order to even know what we can connect to, right? Because it's like, it's one thing to go, okay, we don't see enough campaigns with artists, or we don't see enough campaigns with other influencers within urban culture in Canada, but I think you have to look at it. I mean, you know, a lot of people want to say, oh, they do it in the States and they've been doing it for years, but it's a totally different demographic, right? And so you have to compare apples to apples. So one of the great things that I like about what I'm able to do is that I'm able to kind of bring worlds together. And in other brands, you can't really blame somebody for not involving it because they don't get it. Like, they're not thinking that way or they're not familiar with it. So you have to really look at it from those terms and kind of measure it the same way. The campaign we ran, the Be Unlimited campaign we ran last year with Gavin, got a huge amount of push online, you know, virally. We actually won an award for that campaign, you know what I mean? And but the whole thing was authentic, and it was generated that way because, you know, we're familiar with how to make that happen. So I think you got to look at it that way, you know what I mean? Brands will participate in the things that they get and understand.
There's definitely been some success stories. I mean, when you look at, you know, beyond Mark Echo and stylists, even artists, you know, partnering up with brands to do tours, you know, like Chaos recently doing something with Rogers, you know. I know Cardi's done things with partnership. I even remember back in the day Rascals doing different things. Like, there is those doors open, but I still think we have the challenge. We still have a challenge in the marketplace where there's not enough people that come from our walk of life that understand that work within a lot of these companies that can bring the mentality and knowledge to a company to make it worth viable for them to say, hey, this is where we need to spend our money, you know? I'm sure Priya can speak, you know, from a standpoint of a magazine even, like, it must be challenging for you to even, you know, run a magazine in Canada, running after Canadian companies that are willing to spend money in the magazine, because I know it's challenging even for the record companies to cough up money for ads, you know what I'm saying? So,
and I guess we can turn it towards Priya, because the conversations we've been having all evening has spoken to the fact that, yes, hip-hop culture is influential. It does resonate beyond ethnic barriers and things of that nature. We can say that businesses or corporations across Canada have tried urban influence messages. But the question that I guess I have for Priya is, does corporate Canada, from your viewpoint as a magazine editor, and even in crafting your stories to have a national appeal, do they see the penetration and appeal that hip-hop culture has on the average Canadian? And not just, or do they still see it as a trend, fad?
Well, I would say the majority of corporate Canada, quite bluntly, the answer would be no. And we've been doing the magazine for 5 years, and I would say throughout our whole entire existence, it's been a very difficult process to sort of convince corporate Canada of the influence that the demographic who reads the magazine has, and actually just to convince them of who that demographic really is, because they have a very narrow perspective as to who would be reading Urbanology, even just by hearing the name of the magazine alone, right, without even looking at it. So I think it's been an extreme challenge, and I definitely think the answer is no, corporate Canada's not there yet. But not necessarily as a plug, but just as something of interest, in our upcoming issue, we actually have an article about how there has been some change, and we speak to Jesse in that article and speak to the work that he's doing and the work that some brands are doing to make those changes.
Great. Now, that's pretty much where we want to be right now. I'm going to focus this question towards Jody, and then everybody can chime in on this one. But where does Canadian hip-hop culture have left to grow to be considered a viable industry in any form across Canada? Is it just the fact that and what I'm talking about now is basically questioning the popularity of hip-hop versus the effectiveness of hip-hop?
Where does Canadian hip-hop have left to grow?
Or prove?
You know what? Like, I think that the talent is definitely there. We've seen it through a couple of successes in Canada, but I mean, it's not really going to get to that next level unless we have those types of mediums in place where we can take this whole thing to a total next level. You know what I mean? Like,